Somewhere between Florida, Bermuda, and Puerto Rico, the ocean learned how to keep a secret. Ships vanished. Aircraft disappeared. Radio calls dissolved into static. And long after the wreckage should have surfaced, the legend only grew darker. The Bermuda Triangle has been called a portal, a curse, a graveyard, even proof that the Atlantic is hiding something we were never meant to understand. But the truth may be stranger than a monster story. Because the real mystery is not only what was lost in those waters. It is how fear, weather, bad navigation, and missing evidence fused into one of the most durable myths on Earth. To understand why this story grips people so tightly, start with scale. The triangle is not a lake, or a bay, or a neat crime scene. It is open Atlantic, crossed by shipping lanes, storm tracks, tourist flights, military exercises, and private boats. In a place that busy, accidents are guaranteed. But when the accident happens beyond the horizon, and the ocean takes the wreckage before anyone can photograph it, the mind begins to connect events that may never have belonged together. That is where the legend begins, not with proof of a portal, but with the terrible quiet after a signal vanishes. The Bermuda Triangle is not an official place name. There is no government map that marks its borders in ink. But in popular imagination, the region forms a loose triangle stretching from the coast of Florida to Bermuda and down toward the Greater Antilles. Over time, this patch of ocean became linked to more than 50 ships and around 20 aircraft said to have disappeared under mysterious circumstances. That reputation exploded in the 20th century, especially after writers and television specials transformed scattered tragedies into a single haunted geography. Once the story took hold, every missing vessel and every unexplained delay seemed to feed it. The name itself also did powerful work. A triangle sounds designed. It suggests geometry, intention, and boundaries, even though the borders shift depending on who tells the story. Some versions stretch wide enough to swallow incidents that happened far away from the classic points. Others narrow the map until only the most famous losses remain. That flexibility made the legend almost impossible to pin down. When a disappearance fit the mood, the triangle expanded. When evidence complicated the story, the borders could quietly contract again. One of the cases that gave the legend its weight came in March of 1918. The USS Cyclops, a massive Navy collier carrying manganese ore, disappeared on a voyage north after leaving Barbados. More than 300 people were on board. No distress signal. No confirmed wreckage. No final explanation. Even now, it remains one of the deadliest non-combat losses in U.S. Navy history. That absence is what made the story so powerful. When a ship that large can vanish without leaving a body, a debris field, or a final radio plea, the ocean stops feeling like water and starts feeling like a wall. The Cyclops case is especially haunting because it sits before the age of constant tracking. There were no satellite pings, no automatic transponders, no black box recovery teams waiting with modern search grids. A ship could leave port in good order and then become a rumor moving across telegraph lines. Investigators considered structural failure, overloading, weather, enemy action, and human error. None fully closed the wound. The missing ship became a kind of blank space, and blank spaces are where legends write most confidently. Then came the case that would define the Bermuda Triangle for generations. On December 5, 1945, 5 Navy TBM Avenger bombers left Fort Lauderdale on a routine overwater navigation exercise. At first, nothing seemed unusual. The flight reached its bombing area, turned for the next leg, and then confusion set in. Radio traffic suggested the leader, Lieutenant Charles Taylor, believed both of his compasses had failed. Soon the formation was lost. Pilots argued over direction. One voice insisted that if they could just fly west, they would get home. Instead, the weather worsened, daylight died, and the final messages became desperate. The search plane sent after them also disappeared. 27 men across 6 aircraft were gone. Flight 19 became the perfect triangle story because it unfolded almost like a radio play. The audience could imagine trained pilots hearing one another but failing to agree on where they were. Every wrong turn carried them deeper into fuel danger. Every minute of fading daylight narrowed the choices. The disappearance of the rescue aircraft added a second shadow to the first. Skeptics can explain much of it through navigation error, weather, and command confusion, but the emotional shape remains difficult to shake. Professionals, instruments, voices in the air, and then nothing. By the time stories like Flight 19 reached mass audiences, the Bermuda Triangle was no longer just a place. It was a narrative machine. A vanished squadron. A missing rescue plane. A giant Navy ship with no grave. Each new case entered a pattern that already felt supernatural. In the 1970s, best-selling books and television specials amplified that feeling. The triangle became linked to Atlantis, extraterrestrials, time warps, magnetic anomalies, sea monsters, dimensional vortices, and everything else that could turn uncertainty into spectacle. The legend did not survive because it was proven. It survived because the stories were emotionally perfect, fear, scale, and nobody to contradict the nightmare. Media turned those cases into a pattern with a beginning, a middle, and a threat. A newspaper article could compress uncertainty into a headline. A paperback could place unrelated incidents side by side until they looked like clues. Television could add music, maps, storm clouds, and a narrator's pause. By the time viewers met the triangle, they were not just hearing a list of accidents. They were entering an atmosphere. That matters, because atmosphere can feel like evidence when the facts are incomplete. And yet when official agencies address the Bermuda Triangle, the tone changes dramatically. NOAA does not treat the area as paranormal. The US Navy and Coast Guard do not treat it as supernatural. NOAA points instead to environmental reality. The majority of Atlantic tropical storms and hurricanes pass through or near this region. The Gulf Stream can trigger rapid, even violent changes in weather. The Caribbean is full of islands, reefs, and shallow zones that once made navigation far more dangerous. And there is evidence that a compass in the area can sometimes point toward true north instead of magnetic north, a subtle shift that can matter a great deal when pilots or mariners are already disoriented. The scientific explanations sound less glamorous, but they are not small. The Gulf Stream is a river inside the sea, moving fast enough to relocate debris and distort search assumptions. Tropical weather can build with brutal speed. Shallow banks and reefs can punish small navigational errors. Magnetic variation is not magic, but a pilot already under stress can turn a small compass misunderstanding into a fatal chain. In the real ocean, ordinary forces do not need to be supernatural to be lethal. This is the midpoint of the mystery. If the science is so ordinary, why does the Bermuda Triangle still feel extraordinary? One answer is brutally simple: the sea destroys evidence. The same current that carries warmth through the Atlantic can also scatter debris, erase locations, and move the final traces of an accident far from where anyone expects to find them. A storm can arrive fast. A pilot can misread position. A ship can break at night and vanish before a distress call is ever completed. Once the evidence is gone, imagination fills the vacuum. The myth thrives exactly where the proof fails to stay still. That is the part many retellings skip. Evidence in the ocean has a lifespan. A floating seat cushion, an oil slick, a fragment of wood, even a body can drift, sink, or disappear before searchers reach the right square of water. A land disaster usually leaves a scene. A sea disaster may leave only coordinates, and sometimes even those are wrong. So the absence of wreckage does not automatically prove an impossible event. It often proves that the Atlantic is better at hiding aftermath than we are at finding it. Natural explanations do not all agree with one another in every detail. Some researchers emphasize storms and white squalls. Others focus on rogue waves powerful enough to shatter a ship. Some point to navigation errors compounded by compass confusion and failing visibility. More speculative theories continue to appear, including methane eruptions and magnetic minerals affecting instruments. But notice what all of these have in common: they try to explain the triangle using force, geology, weather, or human limitation. The modern debate is not really science versus magic. It is which natural pressure mattered most in each case, and how much uncertainty the ocean will always refuse to surrender. Rogue waves show how a natural explanation can still sound almost mythical. For years, sailors described walls of water so large that some scientists treated the stories with caution. Later measurements proved that extreme waves can rise suddenly and strike with devastating force. White squalls occupy a similar psychological space, a burst of weather that seems to arrive from nowhere, turning calm into survival in minutes. These ideas do not explain every case, but they remind us that nature has its own horror vocabulary. Still, the Bermuda Triangle keeps reclaiming the emotional high ground through eyewitness testimony. Pilots have described tunnel-like clouds, impossible compression of time, strange light, sudden instrument confusion, and a sensation that the sky itself became mechanical. Bruce Jernan remains one of the most famous modern voices in that tradition. Accounts like his do not settle the mystery, but they do explain why the myth refuses to die. Official reports can close a case on paper. A first-person account can reopen it in the viewer's imagination with a single sentence. Eyewitness accounts keep the legend alive because they put a human nervous system inside the mystery. A pilot who believes time compressed is describing not only an instrument reading, but a memory of fear. A sailor who remembers a strange light is giving shape to confusion at sea. Such accounts deserve attention, but attention is not the same as proof. Memory can be sincere and still incomplete. That tension is exactly why these stories are so difficult to dismiss and so dangerous to overstate. Skeptical researchers like Larry Kush argued decades ago that the Bermuda Triangle was, in large part, a manufactured mystery. His point was not that ships never sank or planes never disappeared. They clearly did. His point was that later retellings often exaggerated calm weather, ignored recovered information, misplaced incidents outside the triangle, or treated incomplete records as proof of something impossible. That distinction matters. A mystery is not always evidence of the unknown. Sometimes it is evidence of how badly a story wants to become a legend. Kush's skeptical work mattered because it changed the question. Instead of asking whether the triangle was cursed, he asked how the files had been handled. Were weather reports quoted accurately? Were incidents actually inside the region? Were vessels truly missing without trace, or had wreckage, causes, and context been left out of later versions? The answers often weakened the paranormal case. But they did not make the deaths less real. They made the storytelling more visible. And yet, even after the debunking, the Bermuda Triangle still works on us. It works because it brings together three things human beings have always struggled with: distance, weather, and missing evidence. The Atlantic is enormous. Storms move faster than judgment. Currents can rearrange the last known truth. We do not fear the triangle because it is a portal. We fear it because it sits at the edge of an old human weakness, the moment when nature becomes too large to witness properly, and absence starts to feel intentional. This is why the Bermuda Triangle remains useful as a mirror. It shows how people behave when certainty is unavailable. Some reach for science. Some reach for conspiracy. Some reach for ancient civilizations, secret weapons, or visitors from somewhere beyond the stars. The pattern is familiar because it appears wherever records break down. A gap opens, and every worldview tries to move in first. The triangle is not only a mystery about transportation. It is a mystery about interpretation. So what are the dark secrets of the Bermuda Triangle? Not aliens. Not Atlantis. Not a hole in the fabric of reality. Its darkest secret may be simpler and more disturbing than fantasy. In this stretch of ocean, ordinary danger can become extraordinary myth. A wrong heading. A violent shift in weather. A current strong enough to carry away the answer. A story retold just loosely enough to become immortal. The triangle remains unsolved in the way all great legends remain unsolved, not because every case resists explanation, but because the ocean never gives back enough certainty to silence the story forever. In the end, the strongest version of the story may be the least supernatural one. The Bermuda Triangle is frightening because it does not need a monster. It only needs distance, weather, flawed instruments, human stress, and a sea deep enough to erase the final page. That does not solve every case neatly, and it should not. Some losses will remain open, not because the impossible happened, but because the evidence needed to finish the sentence is gone. And when the ocean refuses the last answer, the legend keeps breathing.